most organizations have heavily invested in sales enablement methodology and technology. But, for me, this webinar's really quite exciting because I talk about this a lot. And there's one lever that often gets underplayed, and that's the one that actually multiplies everything else, how your managers coach. So I think the research is pretty clear. Organizations where managers coach effectively don't just perform better, they perform materially better. So things like revenue growth is faster, win rates are higher, ramp time is shorter, and attrition drops. And these are all obviously all positive impacts for the organizations that you work for. And, from for what it's worth, from my perspective, I think coaching acts as a multiplier on every other investment that you've made. So by the end of this session, you'll have a blueprint for what coaching excellence looks like in 2026 and how to build it into your team. So I'm very delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Matt Webb, CEO of Mentor Group Limited. Matt, good afternoon, and I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Russ. And thank you all for attending this afternoon or this morning, whatever time zone you're in, and taking your precious time out to join us on something which, as Russ said, is so fundamentally important in what we do in the sales world, and indeed any world that we're in. Being able to coach our teams and our people and even our friends and family to higher levels of performance, to make a positive difference to what they do within their lives. So I'm going to take through. I would encourage you to chat to me as you go through using the chat. Russell's going to keep an eye on that for anything that comes up. Definitely put the questions in there as well, because you might not agree with everything that I say, or you might have a build on things that I say. And I want to make this as interactive with those of you on here live as possible today, so that we can go through and again, make sure that you leave this session with a couple of ideas. I always talk about the concepts of marginal gains, in that if you're going to invest an hour of your time to come along to this webinar or watch this webinar, if you can take one thing that's going to give you a 1% incremental improvement in being a coach or being a leader, then it's time well spent. My experience is that the more collaborative we can make that, the better. So please do put stuff in the chat. If I'm looking over there, it's because I'm looking at the chat. And if I'm looking over here, it's because I'm keeping an eye on time so I don't overrun, which, as my colleagues at Mentor will know, I can talk. So let's get into this. Now, Russell's already mentioned the fact that organizations invest in process, in technology, in people. So the people side of things, sales enablement, the CRM side, technology, and of course, building processes. I'm going to come on to those a little bit more as we go through this today. What I'm going to show you and discuss with you is how often the one piece that is missing is driving that coaching excellence, because that's the glue that holds everything together and can make a difference between performance or lack of performance, but also development and retention of our people. So let's dig into this in a little bit more detail. So here's the key takeaways from today. So clear definition of coaching excellence. What is it? And how do we use coaching in a way that's going to make that difference that I spoke about a moment ago? A practical distinction between coaching and mentoring. I promised Russ, as we were preparing for this call, that I would keep the football analogies to a minimum today, but I can't promise there won't be a few. What I will say is, when we think about coaching and mentoring, quite often people who become managers were often great players, i.e. they were great sellers. And sometimes that can create some tension in being a great coach. And I'm going to cover that in a bit more detail. And then we're going to talk about the things that every single sales individual and sales leader cares about at the moment, which is pipeline. How can you marry up your coaching to the volume, the value, and the velocity of sales pipeline? So we're going to cover that off as we go through. And again, just keep chat coming along the way. Now, we all know, because we're all in various different roles, that things are, let's say, interesting at the moment from a market perspective. There's geopolitical matters happening. There's AI in every corner of our life, and it means a number of things. The first thing it means is, as sellers, we're getting less face time with our buyers than probably we've ever done. Research that was carried out a couple of years ago showed that only 17% of a buyer's time in the cycle is spent with a seller. So you think about that for a moment. That means that 1/5 of the time they're speaking to you, 4/5 they're not. So the time we do get to spend with buyers has got to be optimized. It's got to be as effective as it possibly can be. It's likely that that 17% will reduce further over time. And the reason for that is because buyers can find out as much about your organizations now, in fact, more than they ever could with a really good prompt in AI. So why do they need sellers at all? Why can they not just gather all that information through AI and then make a purchase decision off the back of it? And clearly, it's not quite as easy as that, but it's worth holding that in mind. Because budgets are under pressure, more people are involved again. Same thing happened back in 2008 during the credit crunch. More people got involved, consensus building, so that we were de-risking purchase decisions. Right now, when budgets are pressured, the same can be said. So more complex buying groups, which means as a seller, I need to be engaging with more people and work in a virtual team far better than I've ever had to in the past. And all this comes back to quality. So when we think about the quality of our interactions with our buyers, if we think about the quality of the time we're spending, how well we're understanding the need, how well we're qualifying, are we doing it as good as we possibly can? Or through coaching, can we do it just that little bit better? Because ultimately, revenue is a lagging indicator. It's the result of all of our efforts. Whereas what we should be looking at are what are all those leading indicators, what are those activities that we should be doing, both qualitative and quantitative, to drive the success of our pipelines moving forward. That's where coaching comes in. Because actually, and I believe this to be true, nobody comes to work to fail. Nobody comes to work to do a bad job. Sometimes they just don't know what good looks like. So how can we help them through a coaching conversation to drive great quality in that customer facing time that they've got? So things are changing. We have to adapt. We have to move forward with that reality as it is now. So Russell talked about this a little bit earlier. We've got organizations who are still spending billions of pounds, billions of dollars on sales enablement activities, be that digital, be that virtual or instructor led, still spending lots of money on. Sales enablement in isolation is a risk. Let's go to the chat for a second. What percentage of information do you think you lose after 6 weeks if you attend a training program and then you have no follow-up? What percentage of the information do you think you might lose? Just put that in the chat and I'll keep talking and we'll come back to that in a moment. So some good numbers coming in already. And you're all very, very switched on this call today. It's really high. Now, that doesn't mean we don't want to use it. It doesn't mean we're forgetful. What it means is we've got lots of other things going on. And the research shows that 80% of that information is lost if we don't coach and embed that into our day-to-day practices. It's scary, isn't it? It's quite a big number. So think about that just for a moment. Then we think about the methodology. So the methodology, be that a sales methodology or a qualification methodology, is a framework by which we can operate and engage the customer in a consistent way, because customers do like consistency. So we take that. And of course, I'm a big believer that we should never create clones within sales. You've still got that high element VQ, emotional intelligence. People are still buying from people. So within the framework of the methodology, you've still got the empathy, the relationship, which is absolutely critical and key right now. And then the last thing you've got is CRMs and sales tech. So there's too many to mention. But we actually know within a CRM, within any kind of platform, it's only really as good as the information you put in. The AI will only feed the information in terms of data to insight and then the action that the coach can do if the data is good quality. And we've seen far too often over a number of years that the data is not good quality. The old adage, garbage in, garbage out. So we think of those 3 layers, and if we treat them in isolation or even pull them together, in the absence of coaching, we still don't know whether the quality is there or not. We still know that information is lost. I'll give you a quick sporting analogy, particularly on the sales enablement front. In business, we tend to play the game 95% of the time, and sales enablement is maybe 5, in some cases less, percent of the time. In any professional sport or music, we flip that around. So we practice for 95% of the time, and then we play the game for maybe up to 5%. Now imagine if the game, as it's called, can be part with the coach. So we can change the 95-5 rule to 70-30, to 60-40, to 50-50, where we're focusing much more on the quality of how we play the game through a coaching cadence. Now, by doing that, the coach becomes a true performance lever. No question about that. Because with no judgment, we're looking at ways that we can incrementally improve the way that we play the game so that we get a better outcome in time. And each of these 3 areas absolutely needs a coaching focus to drive the right level of quality. So let me just take a quick look at some of the questions. Russ, what have we got so far? I got one from Rudy. Oh, really nice to see you. How can you improve execution if you don't know what activities have been successful and which ones failed? It's a great question, Rudy, actually. And if you imagine a world where there is no coaching culture in an organization, you're probably not going to know which ones have been successful or otherwise. So a good part of coaching is also sharing information and what's worked really well throughout your team and building a coaching culture peer to peer within your team so that you can replicate success. The opposite is true. And it's interesting because I was with a client just last week, and the subject matter of win and loss reporting came up. And too few organizations, as we see, actually do a separate activity, which is why do we win? Why do we lose? And that in itself is a great coaching conversation, because if we lose, then we learn. If we win, then we can replicate. So for me, it's all about having those great conversations, collaborative conversations, without any judgment within our organizations, Rudy, to actually establish what's working and where do we need to change or coach for better performance. Okay, cool. So let's keep going on here, just keeping an eye on time as well. Now, I mentioned earlier, and one of my colleagues is deeply passionate about this distinction between coaching and mentoring, that many of us sales leaders came from being sales individuals, and it's a different job. So imagine putting, let's say, Harry Kane in goal this evening and Jordan Pickford up front. For those of you who are not interested in football, imagine putting LeBron James into, I don't know, let's say an ice hockey team. It's a different role. It's a different set of skills. It's a different mindset. It's a different focus. Now, what we see of sales leaders is when you've been a highly successful seller, you want to share that information. You want to impart the things that made you a success in your career today. And that's fine, and that's okay. And that can be highly effective. But we see that more as mentoring. So by mentoring, we're sharing our experience, we're sharing our perspectives, and we're giving confidence and direction that what we've done before will work for what we're going to do moving forward. And that's okay. And there are definitely situations where that is absolutely the case. And I'll share a quick story with you. I was doing a coaching session with a client. It was about a year ago now, and I always get the participants to give a score out of 10. You know, how good are you as a coach? 1 is I'm not very good, or I don't know how to do it. 10 is I'm world class. You know, I don't need to be here. And one individual said I'm a 9. I said, okay, great. Let me observe you within your coaching conversation. And he asked a good coaching question. You know, what would you like to focus on today? And the individual said, well, I really need to increase my win ratio. And he said, great, that sounds like a good thing to talk about. What you need to do is this. And went straight into telling the individual. And he looked at me and he went, I'm probably a 4, aren't I? And I said, the number is actually not important. The important thing is capturing yourself in the moment and going, I'm actually not coaching here, I'm mentoring. So coaching short cycle. So it's live right now. You can make a positive difference with coaching. It's questioning based. So there's a great acronym when you are coaching. The acronym is WAIT, and it stands for why am I talking? And what I mean by that is, as a coach, if you are coaching, you should be listening more than you're talking. And then crucially, when you go into a coaching session, it is absolutely about accountability and follow up. And a little bit of an insight here. The accountability is often misunderstood as a coach, that we should be accountable for everything. When you get to the end of a coaching session, it's not you as the coach who summarizes the actions and the by when and what support do you need. It's not that. The other person does. Your coachee does that, because if you're owning everything, then you've got less chance of it happening. Humans actually don't like to be told what to do. If it's their idea, they're significantly more likely to do this. So you've got two styles. One where you're asking, one where you are more guiding, and they're both fine in different contexts. What I would say with mentoring is, if the individual doesn't know what to do, so you ask them and you say, well, give me some ideas of things you could do differently, and they don't know because they're new to it, new role, whatever it is, mentoring's great. But it's not the default. The default should be, let's help enable the individual and coach through and provide our experience when appropriate.
Matt, we've got a question here. Coaching and mentoring, a best practice would be to have both?
Yeah, it helped. It's a great question, and it is to have both. So, take a scenario that if you're coaching a new hire, and let's say you want to coach around quality outbound activity, and we go through the grow model. So for those of you who don't know it, goal, reality, option, will, or way forward. So you've explored the reality of what they're doing, the activity, how they're structuring the call, all those other things. And then you go into the options and you say, well, what do you think you could be doing differently? And they say, I don't know. They might not know. Now, a little tip for you. Most human beings say, I don't know, far too quickly, because they're not thinking about it. So when people say, I don't know, and I've done this with my kids, by the way, so just bear that in mind. I know it worked at the beginning, but they've got wise to it now. You can use questions, and stay with me on this, everybody. Use questions like, what would the answer be if you did know? Because when they've said, I don't know, and then they're thinking it through, you'll be amazed at how often they start to come up with ideas. But if they don't know, don't keep pushing it. And that's helping when mentoring comes in and said, well, would you like an idea from me? Would you like a suggestion from me? And then you can go forward on the mentoring front. Is there an acronym similar to WAIT for mentoring? Not that I'm aware of, Matty. Good question. If anybody has got an acronym similar to WAIT for mentoring, please put it in the chat right now. So we're not saying either of these are better or worse. What we're saying is, quite often in sales leadership, we default to mentoring too soon. And coaching is a skill that you can absolutely build up the capability over time. It is a skill. Anybody can learn to be a great coach. Sometimes we just got to understand where the focus is and what you're trying to get out of that session with the individual. So why do we do it? Why do we need to do this in sales? Going back to the changes that I talked about at the moment, why is it really important right now? Well, think about your sales pipelines within your organization. And there's three areas, three levers that we can pull as leading indicators to give us a best chance of a revenue multiplier. The first is value. So as we are coaching our teams, are we moving to product too soon and we don't understand the customer's business needs too well? If that's the case, we can coach on deal qualification to increase the average order value. If you have a higher average order value, you need less deals potentially to be able to hit your numbers. Let's make sure the deals are clean. Let's make sure that we've really focused on that stakeholder group and we can coach the quality of those engagements. The second one, and a big hot topic at the moment, is demand generation. So how can we get more opportunities in the pipeline, higher volume? Think about that lever. So how are we creating early insight with our customers? How are we driving new and interesting conversations? What can you educate the customer on that maybe AI hasn't got right now, because you can personalize it to a higher degree? And again, great coaching conversation. Let's look at what you're currently doing and what you could do differently moving forward. And then the final one is about velocity. And if we think about velocity, it's the speed at which our deals move through the sales stages. And if you look at your own pipelines in a real honest light, how many deals are in there that have been in there for tens of days, hundreds of days, and they're stuck, and we leave them in there because it makes the pipeline look better. Well, coaches look at that and they say, you've been in a stage 2 deal for the last 90 days. You've not applied a qualification methodology. Let's use that as a great coaching conversation to help you identify the right people, to have the right conversations so that we can start moving this deal through or move this deal out. Great salespeople qualify in, the best salespeople qualify out, and a coach will help individuals do that so that you've got a better idea of the overall leading indicators that are going to help you hit your number. So these are all levers that as a coach we can look at within a sales pipeline conversation to say, where do we need to focus our time so that we can hit the revenue multiplier through great coaching conversations? Keep going with the questions, by the way. So we need to move from inspection to coaching. Inspection's really a look in the rear view mirror activity. It's looking at what have you done in the past. It's looking at what does the data tell us about what's gone on. It's forecasting is often baked on data which is not clean or healthy. So coaches help people move things forward. What could we do differently moving forward? It's all about the execution. We ask great questions without any judgment that help our teams think differently. Think about a time where you were coached and some of the questions that coaches will ask you. They're great open questions that without any judgment just get us to think a bit differently. You know, stop thinking this way and think more peripheral. Make sure we've got evidence behind the forecast. You know, how many deals have slipped when you get to the end of a month or quarter and you go, yeah, well, it was because that person's on holiday or it's going to take too long to sign all the legal paperwork. That should be known a lot earlier. So coaches without the judgment will help people truly understand what's going on. And if you pull all this together and you think about an operating cadence, coaching is most effective when it's not ad hoc. So by that, I mean, if you're going to look at coaching an activity, a forecast, a pipeline, we don't do it once and then again in 3 months and then again in 9. We do that every week or every month, whatever's most relevant to your business, so that we start to drive the right activities, we review those activities, and then we go again. So coaching is all about having a heartbeat of the great conversations to help move our people forward positively or move deals out, because then we don't have to justify why things have gone at a later date. So let's just see what we've got on here. So James has got a mentor acronym in there. M is establish mutual expectations, engage and encourage, navigate and nurture, transfer knowledge, open doors and opportunities, reflect and review. That's nice, James. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so the blueprint is this. The first thing we must always do, and if you think about the grow model I talked about earlier, it's really, really important to follow the flow of that, particularly if you're new to it. We start with a diagnosis. So that would be the reality phase of the grow model. Why do we need to start there? Because often we're problem solvers as sales leaders. And if we're mentors, we're saying, do these things. The challenge with that is without diagnosing what's already going on, we may come up with things that they've already tried, and that's quite demotivating for individuals. So we diagnose first, get into the reality of things, truly understand what's been going on. Then we start to coach the ideas, the options, come up with different solutions to move forward with the goal that we've created. And you might find you need to go back to diagnose and go between 1 and 2 many times to do that. And then crucially, if you can think back to that 80% earlier on in this webinar, as human beings, we change through practice. We don't change through receiving new knowledge. We've got to try something out. So when you come up with options, allow people time to go away and practice. And spoiler alert, it won't always work. So you then have to coach and understand, why didn't it work? What could you do differently? How could you refine your approach along the way? And then embed. Remember, I talked about the XQ, that cadence, that pulse. You'll get lasting change. You practice something, you systemize something or embed it within an operating rhythm, and then it will stick for the long term. And then you measure. And whilst this might look linear to you, it's actually more cyclical. By that, I mean it's going to keep going round and round and round, and you'll see those leading indicators of volume, value, and velocity improving through your great coaching conversations. Diagnose where you are, think about what you could do moving forward, go try, embed, measure. So this works really, really well. So the coaching conversation has to be focused first and foremost. We've all been in meetings where we're going, right, what is it we want to get out of this today? So think about the grow model right at the beginning. The goal is the focus. What do you want to look at? Is it a behavior? Is it skill? Is it an opportunity? Is it a relationship you're trying to improve? What is the focus? Then we explore in that diagnosis piece where we are, and then we think about what we can do differently. Then we start to commit. And remember what I said earlier, in coaching, we always get the individual to summarize the commitments, because otherwise there are ideas and humans don't like to be told what to do. And then crucially, with that cadence, we follow up. In my experience, the last point here, even if we do the other three really well, is we don't put enough rigor into the follow-up. So we leave it for too long, and then all of a sudden we go, oh yeah, I remember that action. Let's take ownership when we're as coaches to make sure that we are putting that rigor, that cadence in, so that we can move that forward positively. And then we're nearly there. Just a couple more slides to share with you. So when we look at this empowering managers, we have to think about these things that I've already covered off on here today. Questioning, diagnosis, feedback, role play, and opportunity coaching. Give your teams as many opportunities as possible to practice the skill of coaching, because it is a skill and it can be improved over time. So give great opportunities. If you're a second line manager on this call, I would say, get into the habit of actually watching your team's coaching and coach the coach. Find the marginal gain for the coach. Make sure that cadence is in place. It's so important. So if you've got a forecast and you're qualifying a deal and you use a BANT or a whatever qualification tool, you come up with a great set of actions. If I know as a seller that a week from now we're going to sit and go through those actions, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to do all the activities. Versus the opposite, that if we don't have that cadence, I'll go, yeah, I'll never remember anyway. So it's incumbent on us as leaders to make sure we've got that cadence and rigor. And please try not to cancel the one-to-ones if you can avoid it, because it doesn't send the right message out to the team. Make sure it's visible, through the CRM, the technology we talked about earlier. We can show the trends on the 3 V's, and then make sure you apply all of that into live opportunities. So you can see a pattern emerging here, everybody, that as managers and coaches, it's not a once and done. It's absolutely about putting your focus on the other individual that you are coaching. It's about making sure that we use the enablement that they've had. We think about the process and where they are in the process or the methodology. We think about the quality of the data within the CRM and how we can coach that through as we go in. So some takeaways, just to get you thinking just for one moment here. And maybe you've got a chat. What sort of things are resonating with you when we think about coaching? It could be weight, it could be the cadence, it could be, that level of inspection that we've talked about. It could be a number of things. And I'm curious, if you think of one thing as a coach that you could improve today, whether you want to share it in the chat or not, that's entirely up to you. What would it be? What would your marginal gain be? Something that's really resonated with you today from everything that we've covered on this call that you can then take away and improve moving forward.
Okay, we've just got a question come in. What do you want to work on first? As a question really resonated with me.
Yeah, and sometimes, Chris, the thing that I've seen, if we take sales, our ultimate lagging indicator is how are you doing against your number. And let's say you're at 20% and you sit down and you go, right, well, this coaching session, we're going to work out how to get you to 100%. Now, that can be quite the leap and quite demotivating. So when you think about the leading indicators, what do you want to work on first? Starts moving people forward. Of course, you want to get them to the performance levels. You also don't want to make it too daunting along the way. So good. I'm glad that resonated. Um, Victoria, takeaway is not to jump into solutions. Yeah. You'll be surprised, Victoria, how often what would the answer be if you did know? I mentioned earlier that I say that to I got 3 grown-up kids. But when I first started to do this, probably 10 years ago, it worked every single time. It doesn't work anymore because they say, "Oh yeah, be quiet, Dad. You're annoying now." And try it over the next 24 hours because people go, "Don't know." What would the answer be if you did know? And they'll go, "Well, will work 9 times out of 10." Cadence, Helton, super important, but often managers face, "I have no time for that." How to deal with that? And so that's a great question. The research actually shows that when you put a rigor of cadence in place, we did a study with one client that showed that actually it reduced their time. It increased their available time by 50%. You might go, well, how? Because when they were doing a forecast meeting and a pipeline meeting, they had the discipline not to talk about forecast and pipelines ad hoc through the rest of the week. So it freed up loads of time in duplicated effort by doing that. So that's a great question. Michael, how does a potential coachee encourage coaching in a workplace where no
Cultural.
well, that's a great question. Well, the first thing is be the person who starts it off, and show the successes. And it's like excuse the analogy, but it's a pebble in the pond. As soon as people start to see the success of coaching, we can almost show that through leading and lagging indicators, more and more people want a part of it. So it's a cultural change. Cultural change has to start with somebody doing something different and proving it works. Great question, though.
Matt, just one for me really. So when you're implementing coaching excellence, or when you see implementing, when you're implementing coaching excellence, what's the biggest mistake you see organizations typically make in the first 90 days, and how do you avoid it?
Firstly, so there's 2 things with that one, Russell. The first thing is it stops at first line manager level and doesn't go any higher.
Yeah.
So, if second line manager, VPs, CROs don't also embrace a coaching culture, it sends a message to their direct reports that it's actually not important. So, and if you don't have everybody flying in formation during that time, people elect to do it or not. So you really must have everybody. It goes back to Michael's question. We really must have everybody where possible, being an advocate and an active coach. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and I've talked about it a few times on this webinar, it's having a lack of discipline towards a cadence. Now, cadences, types of meetings will differ company to company. But if we don't commit to putting them in the diary, keeping them in the diary, and having that rigor or follow up, then things don't work out as well as they can. So that's the execution quotient, as we call it, XQ. That's really, really important to make sure that things start to get embedded. Good question.